Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast, whose foreign editor happens to be Christopher Dickey. Welcome back as well to Rachel Donadio of The New York Times. We're with Saray Suarez, Venezuelan reporter and photojournalist, and Stefan Siemens, correspondent for Spiegel Online. This vote in Austria is a redo. We were talking before the break about the vote in Austria. It's a redo of a vote that took place a few months back. The Green Party candidate versus the far-right candidate. Both center-left and center-right were out in the first round. There was a technicality. I think it was absentee ballots that weren't properly sealed. And now this time around...
I think that's by the way, yes, and then it was postponed.
Yeah.
It was supposed to happen in October, then it was postponed.
Because the envelopes, the glue on the envelopes
was not good.
Very well.
The glue on the envelopes, that didn't stick, and that could change the course of history.
Exactly. Exactly. Sticky question, you might say. But that's so. It's like a tennis match or a sports game that gets rained out all of a sudden. All the givens change, all the momentum changes, and you did have the Green Party candidate winning, and now. We'll see how it goes.
By a very, very small margin.
By a very small margin. Yeah. My feeling, by the way, if that segment is indicative of what's been going on, where Hofer keeps calling the other candidate a liar, I think that'll hurt him, actually. He sounds like the big lie is his calling everything that his opponent says a lie.
Mm. Another nail-biter awaits across the Dolomites, a referendum on changing the constitution in Italy that could spell political doom for the last remaining poster child for Europe's center-left.
I've made some mistakes, especially at the beginning, but it doesn't concern me. It doesn't concern the present ministers. It concerns your children, so that they don't grow up in 20 years complaining about the reforms that weren't made. When you do something, you move one step at a time. You improve bit by bit. That's the goal of this reform.
All right, this constitutional referendum, he says, I made some mistakes. The mistake was at the beginning, he put his own political future on the line, saying, I will resign if it's no. And Italians seem to be saying, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's really in a weak position. We don't know for sure. In Italy, there's a blackout on polls for a while before the election, so we're not really sure. But this is a very technical change to Italy's constitution. The goal is to streamline the process of Italy is a bicameral system, lower house, Senate. They have equal powers, and so things just get stuck there forever. So the idea is to eliminate the Senate and have it be appointed people from regions. Okay, this is quite technical. Normally, a referendum is yes or no on something like abortion or getting rid of nuclear power. But this has become a really complicated thing. Renzi, as you say, he said, if this doesn't go through, then I'm stepping down. So then it becomes a referendum on Renzi. He has plenty of enemies.
Well, here's the question, because here in France, if you just take the question at face value, we have a bloated legislature. We have 577 members of parliament in the lower house. Italy, if you add up the Senate and the lower house, it's 945.
Yeah. No, it's a lot. So the idea was Renzi came to power as this young guy who says, I'm going to change the system from within to prevent parties like the Five Star Movement from gaining more momentum. Instead, what's happened is he's personalized a referendum that he may well lose in a way that will then give even more power and momentum to the Five Star Movement.
But how could Italians be... We had somebody from the Five Star Movement in our show yesterday, and they argued, oh, you don't need to reduce the number of lawmakers. You just need to cut their salary in half.
Okay, so I mean, there are so many different interconnected levels here. Whether Italy needs to change its.
But do Italians buy that?
By what? That you could just
the
cut
argument
the
that we don't need to cut the number of MPs, we just need to cut their salaries.
Look, there is a tremendous amount of anti-political sentiment in Italy. There's a sense that who are these guys and women, and what have they done for us lately? And that's what swept the anti-political Five Star Movement into having a significant number of seats in 2013. So I do think that the aim is to make the system work better, but there are also some problems with what the reform would actually bring about.
Well, he made this referendum about himself, but also he came to power without the votes of people.
Yeah.
And now he's facing the votes of the population, and it's
Well,
coming
he
back
did
to
very
him,
well in the
so-
European elections with 41%, which is, by European standards, a landslide.
But this is going to be really almost a personal fight
Yeah.
against the person that he is.
And he has a lot of enemies. I mean, Berlusconi sees this as an opportunity to try to come back, even though he can't really hold office anymore. The Five Star Movement really wants to bring him down. His own enemies within the left, Massimo D'Alema, would be delighted if Renzi were to step down. The left, as usual, divided against itself.
Yeah, he's come out against
and
it.
Right. Yeah. So it's a referendum on him. No one quite knows who'll replace Renzi if he falls, but I think.
And that's what's stirring uncertainty in the
That's what's stirring
markets.
uncertainty. But after Trump, after Brexit, there's kind of a sense that anything's possible.
Yeah.
And Stefan Siemens, you mentioned that 41% in those European elections. Italy was the outlier. The center-left was the only country where the center-left did well. What's going to happen now to the center-left in Europe?
It's going to be the end of them. There's not many left, and it augurs badly for the rest of the European elections. We in Germany will have one coming up at the end of next year, and it will mean that it's going to be what we said earlier. There seems to be a shift anti-establishment, and that sentiment is used by the right. And Renzi, for some reason, has put his own career on this decision. So, stupid thing to do, but it will also mean for Italy the end of any possible reform.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough country to reform. Renzi is now a face of the establishment, even though he was seen as like the young guy trying to shake things up. And a poll found that more older people over 65 were in favor of supporting voting yes for the referendum and supporting Renzi, and younger people were opposed to it. So there's also a generational divide. It doesn't matter what his age is, but he's just seen as the establishment. When things aren't going well, you blame the people who are in power.
And the financial consequences will be most probably terrible.
Italy has a lot of non-performing loans in its banks. It's in a pretty fragile situation, but I don't know. The question is, will these complicated European financial mechanisms hold? And
All right, we'll see how the sun rises on Monday. We'll see how the sun rises on Monday in the United States as well. That's when we're expecting the next big batch of announcements from the Trump transition team, a transition that is definitely different. The image of the week, a three-way dinner at an upscale New York French restaurant between the president-elect, his chief of staff, there he is, and one of Trump's staunchest critics on the campaign trail, former candidate Mitt Romney, being vetted for Secretary of State. Is that going to happen, Christopher Dickey?
I'll be surprised if it happens, but I think it's a good idea, a very good idea for Trump. It'll start to bring the party back together. It'll irritate some of his supporters, certainly. I mean, we already heard from one of his spokespeople that she didn't like the idea, and she thought it was a terrible idea to have Romney as Secretary of State. But also Romney would be a voice that people would feel some confidence in overseas, when right now they look at President Trump and they don't know what the hell he's thinking, because he doesn't really know what he's thinking. Yeah. So I think Romney would be a very good choice.
I don't know whether he'll pick him, but just those images in the restaurant, as you say, I mean, it's almost as if he wants to show the world, hey, Romney, I'm just, look, I know we're talking, but I might not choose you, but I want everyone to know. I mean, it's like a game show move.
Well, is he trying to humiliate Romney? Some people think he is. It's possible. On the other hand, the other person most mentioned as Secretary of State is Rudy Giuliani, who seems to have completely lost his mind over the last year. I mean, when he was out campaigning for Trump, he said things that were absolutely outrageous and also incredibly stupid. So, he said that there were no terrorist attacks in the United States before Obama, and he was mayor on 9/11 of New York City. So it's just nuts.
Among the announcements, and again, it's made in this very strange way. He's at a campaign rally in Ohio. Yeah. He says, I'm only going to announce it on Monday, but here's my announcement for Defense Secretary. James Mad Dog Mattis, a retired Marine general, who's only been retired for 3 years. Normally, you're supposed to wait 7 years before you can move from the Pentagon from the Army to the Pentagon. An official telling the Washington Post that the biggest concern is that the post of Defense Secretary was never intended to be a kind of Joint Chiefs of Staff on steroids. What are your thoughts when you look at this process, Stefan?
Well, the process, politics over scallops dinner, it's strange. I mean, from a European point of view, that looks very amateurish. But I think that's the appeal of Trump. He wants to show that his style is different, that he's ruling by a gut feeling. You said, he probably doesn't even know what he's going to do. And so far, if you look at his nominations, it's a club of millionaires and billionaires, all added up.
Of course it is. Who else does he know?
Yeah, right. But I mean, is for the leadership of the biggest power in the world still? My goodness.
He's a showman. He's a showman. He comes from showbiz, and that's what he's doing right now.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that Americans are going to have their own version of Chavez in the coming years, because they're gonna be they're gonna have to get used to get important and major announcements on Twitter, on TV, on a dinner, on a restaurant. That's the way this kind of politics is done. And there was a lot of jokes comparing Chavez to Trump during the campaign. I guess it was not really a joke. It's a fact.
Okay, more Chavez to Trump or more Berlusconi to Trump?
Well, it's yeah. I mean, I think Chavez has a little more blood on his hands, I think, in some ways, Berlusconi. But it's the same showman-like approach. I mean, but one thing about Berlusconi was he really cared what the United States and thought of Italy, and Italy is basically an air force carrier for NATO, and it would do anything so. In some ways, Berlusconi relied and supported the United States very much. Now, with Trump in charge of the United States, who knows who's going to support that order?
Let's talk about defense, because we've seen the offensive going on right now in Aleppo. Some saying that the Russians and the Syrians taking advantage of this transition period to unencumberedly advance.
Yeah.
But would the United States really have done anything to stop them anyway?
Well, I don't know, but it's clear they're not going to do it now. I mean, I wrote a long piece in the Daily Beast about going back to 1980 when in El Salvador, where in those months between the election of Ronald Reagan and his taking office, you had all kinds of Americans getting killed in El Salvador because the right-wing death squads figured the gloves were off. Now you have that.
This isn't the same, though, because
now you have it written on a big scale where you have Putin and you have Assad thinking, oh, this guy's essentially going to sign off on anything we do, and what can lame duck Obama do? So why not push it? Why not push it?
And Trump is a declared admirer of Putin. I mean,
Well, as is Fillon, as is Le Pen. I mean,
But he's Secretary of Defense. He's not very. He doesn't agree very much on the Russian position.
Yeah, that was the question, because you have on the one hand his new national security advisor, General Allen, who seems to like Mr. Putin, and you've got Mad Dog Mattis, who's not such a mad dog, it seems, when it comes to this.
No, the warrior monk is another name for him. I mean, I've actually, it's amazing. I haven't heard anybody say anything really very negative about Mattis. People in the military establishment, people outside of Washington, they seem to think this is really quite a good choice.
A professional choice, at least.
Well, a professional choice, and that if we're going to be out there making a lot of wars, which it seems we'll be doing, he's got the first-hand experience to know not only what's possible, but where the limits are. Whereas people, certainly in the military, felt that Obama just didn't want to do any. He might send drones out. He might do what he had to do, but he was always going to be a day late and a dollar short.
Before we move on, Stefan Siemens, front page of your newspaper, kind of interesting. It looks this photo of it says a scare. Is that how you translate it?
A terribly powerful family.
A terribly powerful family. I wrote a scary, powerful family.
Yeah.
A terribly powerful family. Quite a picture.
Well, the story's still being written as we talk in New York, and about the strange connections between President Trump and his own business. Now he's in a tweet he said that he would refrain from meddling in the business operations, but that stepped very short of saying that they would step down from the ownership. And the ethics committee in the United States is up in arms to say, how can you possibly run the country and run your own business?
Yeah, a year and a half ago, I happened to be at a luncheon with Ivana Trump, the ex-wife who is the mother of several of those people. And I said, so what, you think you'd be a good president? Oh, I'd be a great president. Great president. And how would that affect you? She said, oh, my children will run all the companies.
Yeah.
We're going to know more because he says he's going to sever ties, but there'll be an announcement at a press conference. First one since July. It's happening December the 15th.
That's a long time from now. That's who knows? I mean, do you think he will untangle all the? I don't know whether he's going to be able to untangle those things or whether he wants to.
All right.
I'm sure his lawyers will find a way around of constructing something.
I've heard that at Trump Tower they're selling Christmas tree ornaments with the red hat that says "Make America Great Again." I mean, it's very it's a whole new business model.
When he won the election, they took one of those hats and put it under a glass case on top of velvet and sat it on the stage like it's a player in the whole thing. Make America Great Again.
Right.
Brought his daughter to the meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister.
Should we now sing the national anthem?
Yeah.
Other stories this week. Grief and anger after the charter plane carrying Brazilian side Chapecoense crashed into a mountain ahead of the biggest game in the club's history, the final of the Copa Sudamericana in Medellin, Colombia. Cockpit recordings suggest electrical failure and that the plane may have run out of fuel. Staying in Colombia, President Santos hoping it's second time lucky for peace with the Marxist FARC rebels, with both houses of parliament ratifying a revised deal to end Latin America's longest conflict, the first narrowly rejected in a referendum. And in Cuba, the long goodbye to Fidel Castro, who passed away 1 week ago at the age of 90. Here we see images of the procession leaving Santa Clara and the mausoleum for Che Guevara. That was on Wednesday. Castro's ashes traveling the island before their burial Sunday in Santiago de Cuba, there where his fighters launched the 1959 revolution. And by the way, world leaders, some have shown, some of them, Greece's far-left Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe, Jacob Zuma of South Africa, and one that I'm sure Sarai Suarez will recognize.
We have come here to this sacred site to honor this eternal youth, the eternal dreamer, the eternal rebel. From the homeland of Simón Bolívar and Hugo Chavez, I bring a commanding voice, a voice that has in it millions of voices, to say, with admiration to you all, and with utmost gratitude, Comandante, mission accomplished.
Sarai Suarez.
Mission accomplished. You have destroyed Venezuela. That's what he can say. I mean, he's following the same line of the Cuban economy, and that's why we are now living what we're living in the country. People are living in boats. The New York Times did a great piece about that because we are the new
people nation,
balseros del aire. Éramos antes, and now we are the balseros, the people who leave the country by boat. Well, the people who were in the funeral, I don't know how the funeral of Fidel were obviously people who felt a sort of admiration and connection to the leader that he was in a time fighting against the United States. But it's really a terrible legacy what he leaves. He leaves a country completely destroyed and also a model that they exported, like in the case of Venezuela, that is not good news for the citizens of this country.
Stefan Simons, when you see the coverage in this country, it's back to the old fault lines. You know, the left and the right, and for the left, it's the guy who stood up to the United States, and for the right, it's the brutal dictator.
Well, I mean, you know, it takes me back to my own early days in engagement in politics, where even I said, "Oh, Fidel, Che Guevara, Mao Zedong," you know, was that. For a time, they were the myth, the icons of a better world. And of course, being at a very long and safe distance, it took us a long time to understand the inner makings of that society, which was just bad as East Germany, for that matter. You know, Secret Service, hundreds and thousands of people put into jails, dissidents being pursued right after in the late 50s once he won against Batista, and what left was this kind of mythical figure that he was, endorsing the revolution in such a more Latin, relaxed, sexy style than the Soviet bloc. It looked like Latin America had found a more tropical way to represent the revolution. Well, too bad it wasn't true.
He understood soft power.
Well, he did understand soft power and hard power. I mean, he could be very hard indeed, and he shipped a lot of guns around Latin America. I think one thing that critics of him, and I would be one as well, but a lot of critics are forgetting the environment that he was coming out of. I think we forget just how bloody and violent the right-wing dictatorships of Latin America were. And his initial charm was that he seemed to be fighting against them, not only against Batista. And a lot of them were backed by the United States. A lot of them were supported by American money, by the CIA. And that should be, in trying to develop a whole picture of Fidel, that should be taken into account. But when I used to go to Cuba fairly frequently in the 80s, I always found it depressing because it's the most vibrant Latin society you can possibly imagine. And there was this kind of Bulgarian Soviet miasma over everything. And it was really a revolution of lowered expectations. The whole purpose of the revolution was not to teach people what they can be, much less what they can obtain, but to teach them that they shouldn't want those things. And I think that just isn't, ultimately it didn't fit very well with the Cuban personality or any human personality.
Yes, this kind of leftist movements get in power to fight against the right dictatorships and all that, and they forget after what they came to do, and they become even worse or the same thing that they were fighting. And that's what he did.
It's happening. Nobody mentions Nicaragua now, but the Sandinistas are still in control of Nicaragua, and they've become tyrants.
Yeah, exactly. So.
We're going to leave it there for now. I want to thank our panel, Christopher Dickey. I want to thank Sara Suarez, Stefan Siemens, Rachel Donadio. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Diptyque Laurent.
Hi, François.
Hard to block out all the speculation now that we've had this surprise announcement that France's president isn't running for re-election. Not so much about if, but when his prime minister will announce.
That's right. First of all, there's a lot of humorous takes on François Hollande's announcement yesterday. I just want to show you a couple of tweets. A lot of photo mock-ups today. This first one you see, François Hollande, Barack Obama. I spent the last hour thinking of a good kind of combination. I couldn't come up with one. But it was pretty much a mic drop moment. Nobody was expecting it. This user, actually, Scarface Cartel, notes the irony that Hollande, Obama and David Cameron were all calling for Bashar al-Assad to leave, and yet he has politically outlived all three of them, which is a very interesting observation. While this user has come up with a couple of verbs, so fionner, which is the act of, I guess, François Fillon, is arriving when you least expect it, and Hollande is leaving when you least expect it.
Politics is theater.
Is theater. Yeah. And finally, this is a great mock-up. This user has been superimposing Hollande's face onto various characters. Just to see a few. There's Margaret Thatcher there.
Some people have a lot of free time.
I think he's got, this guy is known for his photo mock-ups, as you might see in the background there. There he is as Zlatan. So, well, more seriously, Huffington Post is looking at, well, what does the end of Hollande's term look like? What's he going to do? And
because it's going to be 5 months.
And he's essentially a sitting duck for those 5 months.
Lame duck.
Lame duck.
And a sitting duck.
A lame duck. But it won't be a holiday. He'll have to focus on issues like domestic terrorism, which is obviously still a big issue, the Syrian war, and also, most importantly, Huffington Post says he'll be looking to forge a legacy at the end of his presidential term, one that obviously helps us forget that he was the most unpopular president pretty much ever in France.
All right, and again, we were talking about his heir apparent, the prime minister, who, as we were saying earlier, a little bit pushed him under the bus.
That's right. Is he or is he not? Will he not? That's a burning question on social media. This is an iconic scene from the film La Haine. That's Vincent Cassel looking into the mirror saying, "Who's the boss? I'm the boss." So this Kaiser Soze says Valls, that's what Valls was saying to himself this morning. Huffington Post notes that Manuel Valls changed his cell phone number around 8 p.m. On Thursday, French time. The reason we know is because his office notified journalists that he had a new cell phone number. So many people are saying, does that mean he's going to leave? Because that was pretty much came just as Hollande was making his
because what does he do? Does he step down or to run his campaign, or does he stay prime minister?
And that's exactly what Le Monde is looking at. Can you stay prime minister and be a candidate? Well, you can in France. There's nothing stopping him. But it does raise a lot of red flags. There'll be a lot of conflicts of interest. Now, interestingly, a poll came out. I know this is not the year to really believe in polls, but this poll came out this Friday from Harris Interactive saying that French voters actually want Valls to be their socialist presidential candidate, well ahead of Arnaud Montebourg. Now, Twitter does not agree. This cartoon was posted on Twitter. You see Valls there is the tail of the snake that's Marine Le Pen. So obviously,
saying trust in me like in the Jungle Book.
Exactly. So obviously a very sort of damning view of that. And this, a lot of these kind of pictures with no on them have been appearing on Twitter. People on Twitter don't want Valls.
There were doubts as well on the panel, I noticed, about what his chances. But so we'll have to see. It's really Stéphane, just a quick question on this. The issue of 5 months, the French have never had a lame duck president, have never had this kind of thing before.
No, and well, I mean, it will ruin his standing within the European community. You know, you mentioned all the important questions that he might be concerned with. I mean, his hands are basically bound. I mean, he's just, and as he actually conceded last night, I mean, he said, well, you know, I'll manage until the handing over in May.
He becomes a lot less interesting at EU summits.
I'm sorry?
He becomes a lot less interesting at EU summits.
He's no power anymore. He won't be taken for serious. And, you know, for the next 5 months, he's just going to sit in the Élysée, enjoy his office and the view into the garden. But, I mean, hell, no time for taking decisions anymore.
Well, I don't know about that. He was already toast. I mean...
Okay. We're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you, Diptyque Laurent. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.